You can't mention simulation theory without mentioning the Matrix movies.
People were going crazy over it. The Matrix was real.
Okay, hi Rodney, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Howard?
Not too bad, thank you. So, congratulations on the documentary. It's mind-blowing content, to say the least. I mean, having seen it, it all kind of draws to some kind of a conclusion and makes a little bit of sense. But to come up with the actual idea for this whole thing must have been really difficult. I think even more difficult than maybe a piece of fiction, to come up with how to approach, how to kind of find all these different theories and create a piece of a documentary about it in 90 minutes, 100 minutes. That must have been a nightmare in itself, not just to kind of know where you want to go, but not know where the rabbit hole, if you will, was going to take you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it started very simple, right? And then it kind of grew out of control. You know, the original notion was just that I would talk to people who believed that we were living in a simulation, ask them, you know, what happened to them to make them think about it, and how has that idea changed their life. And they all started, you know, they all, their stories all went into these different directions. And then based on things that they said, we started interviewing, you know, other outside folks who had interesting kind of perspectives that tied into it. So, you know, the movie that you see is not a movie that I could have conceived, you know, when we were starting out. And I think Lucy Walker, the documentary filmmaker, really put it well when she said, editing a documentary is less like editing a scripted movie than it is like writing one.
Yeah, it just kind of writes itself, no? I mean, before going in, what were you a skeptic going in? What were your thoughts on this whole theory before going in?
Well,
and how did you come out of it and at the other end?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think on both sides of it, it feels to me unknowable by most standards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is science that gets into it. You know, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk and others have sort of explored, you know, sort of the questions that it provokes, you know, in the world of physics. But, you know, I'm not smart enough to go too deep down most of that. You know, I think some of the principles is that at the furthest end of a microscope or a telescope, you can kind of, there are questions about what would be a pixel size, you know, that there would be a point where you couldn't get any smaller or any bigger, like what's the resolution of the screen we're on. But again, I start to get kind of lost because all those folks are so much smarter than me. So, you know, the questions that, you know, I really like to kind of get into in something like this is, well, what happens to a person who believes this? How does it change their understanding of the world and the choices that they make in living their life? And 9 times out of 10, they've gone through something, you know, really fascinating that's left them there. And a lot of those stories, you know, are, you know, these interesting kind of nonfiction twilight zones.
So obviously the jumping off point is Philip K. Dick, especially this basis for Total Recall. Now we can remember it for your wholesale. When you came across this speech that he gave in 1977, were you able to find anybody that was actually present at this speech? Because for them, that must have been mind-blowing back in 1977 to hear this guy come up with these kind of things. That if we hear them now, it really doesn't sound so crazy, especially the last kind of year that we've gone through now.
Yeah, no, I haven't spoke to anybody who was there. You know, it was, you know, in France in 1977 at a science fiction convention, where they must have been utterly baffled because, you know, one of the first things he says is that I'm going to tell you something that's true. I'm not going to talk about my science fiction work. And then he goes off on an idea that's just as complicated and as mind-blowing as anything that he wrote in one of his novels. You know, and we only show, I don't know, maybe 10, 15% of it. You know, that there was an awful lot more there as well. And, you know, when I think about him being a person who could see the idea of simulation theory from the vantage point of 1977, it's kind of unreal to me because, you know, what did computers look like in 1977? What was the height of computer graphics? Maybe like that Space War game, where you had, like the ship from asteroids fighting,
Space Invaders, yeah.
that to think it today, well, I mean, you look around at technology, and well, you can see a perfect simulation of the world from where we're at. We're not there yet, but you can do and Elon Musk talks about it in that Q&A, about the timeline of video games over 40 years. That, like, if this is what they did in 40 years, what are they going to do in 100 years, 400 years, 1,000 years? And you can just imagine it. But he was able to see it from, halfway around the world.
What a question that the documentary definitely triggered in my mind was almost the opposite to this theory. This idea that we've got the blue pill and the red pill. No, and the red pill is kind of to go down the rabbit hole, and the blue pill is just to wake up and carry on as everything was as normal. I kind of felt that these people that were delving into the theory were almost the people who didn't want to. It's just my opinion there, but I felt that they were the ones that were taking the blue pill because they were adopting this idea of this theory so that they didn't have to kind of interact with what we appreciate as being real life. Did you ever come across people with that, or was that something that was on your mind when you were making the documentary?
It was something that, again, it wasn't a question that I could have conceived of before I got there. But even Paul gets close to that idea towards the end, where he says, but it's an interesting, the way he poses it as like a either or question, right? He's like, on the one hand, it could be that the simulations are getting better and the people around me are less fake, right? As opposed to the chemical robots that he remembers as a kid. But maybe that's not what's happening. And what's happening is that I'm able to understand people better because I'm maturing. And that's a real, incredibly impossible red pill, blue pill question to ask yourself. But he has the presence of mind to realize that, either at the height of his exploration of simulation theory, he's still able to, to conceive that an alternative to it.
I mean, something that was very timely. I mean, you made this film before lockdown and the pandemic, but something that felt very timely watching it yesterday was the fact that a lot of the people said that they felt that things became very routine and they kind of learn these routines. So I imagine that since you made the film, you would have really loved to be able to pick these same people's brains again to see what they felt about the theory in the current situation, no? I mean, that would be a completely new documentary in itself, no?
Yeah, maybe that's the sequel, but the fact that, because of the lockdown, we have found ourselves more, in these repetitive cycles and are interacting much more with screens. I mean, even, I'm talking to you on a screen, has become a way of life that's seemingly endless. There's an interesting thing. It didn't make it into the film. Maybe this will be a deleted scene, but talking to Nick Bostrom, the Oxford philosopher who wrote The Simulation Hypothesis, I was picking his brain about his reactions to different movies that explored simulation theory, The Matrix, Existence, The 13th Floor. So which one of these did you find did the best job of explaining what simulation theory was like? And he surprised me with when he said Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day, right. That's what everyone's talking about now, yeah.
We've all been at for the last, 10 months.
So just to finish off then, obviously, I mean, you said you could obviously make a sequel about what's going on right now, but because we've had this it's almost like a trilogy that's moved forward, 3 documentaries. Have you got any ideas where you'd like to go next? Maybe a fictional film, another documentary film, any idea where you want to go next?
I'd love to do it. I would never abandon documentaries completely. And there's 2 or 3, ideas that I'd love to jump into. But I think it would be an amazing change of pace to leap into a scripted narrative film from here. Because one of the real joys of this project was being able to take people's stories and translate them into individuals, trying to imagine what, Paul's car, driving into that movie screen would look. So to, translate, some classic science fiction book, or a great script that way, I think would be a challenge that would be, incredibly rewarding at this point.
That's fantastic. Well, I wish you the best of luck with the film at Sundance. Hope it goes down really well. And also when it releases just shortly afterwards. And I hope to speak to you sometime in the future about something else.
I appreciate that. Great to talk to you, Howard.
All right, great to talk to you, Rodney. Have a good day.
I am not a body at all. I am the code. I am a string of numbers constantly replicating its some vibration.
None of this is real.
I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see.